Joined now by Congressman Chip Roy of Texas. Good morning, Congressman. How'd the CNBC hit go?
Yeah, it went fine. We were talking a little bit about stock trading with my Democrat colleague, Abigail Faber. But thanks. Sorry for the delay.
Well, I'm not a problem. I want to let people know I've known of Chip Roy for a long time. He's been a friend of the program in the back rooms for a long time. Here's the bio. Born in Maryland, grew up in Virginia, went to Loudon High School, which has been in the news lately. Went to UVA, so I didn't know anything about football. Got his JD from the University of Texas, so he still doesn't know anything about football, but he might have learned con law from Lino Graglia, so he's smart there. Clerked for Posner, which has got to be a nightmare. I clerked on the D.C. circuit, but Posner, woo. Assistant United States Attorney in the Eastern District of Texas. Ghostwriter, we have that in common. I've ghosted a couple of books for high-profile people for Rick Perry, worked for Rick Perry, then went to work for Ted Cruz, then worked for the Texas Attorney General as a Texas Assistant Attorney General. He is a cancer survivor. He is now known to you, but I've known about him for a long time because at the Republican Study Committee gathering in Northern Virginia, when I was the guest speaker, Chip Roy raised his hand and went on about the national debt. And if I recall correctly, Congressman Roy, I told you that's not a winner. Is that do I remember that correctly?
Well, that's about right. Yeah, you nailed it. We had a good little exchange on that, and I'm right.
Well, I think you might be. I want to go. I don't want to look backwards. I always look forward. I told everyone we'd eventually get to yes because you were running the negotiation. I want to talk about the national debt crisis. Are you on the budget committee or are you in appropriation? Where did they land? Where have you landed, Congressman, on committees?
So I've not landed yet. In my first term, I was on the budget committee. I frankly, I got to be honest with you, I have backed away from making any asks because I was in the middle of negotiations and I didn't want it to be anything about me. So I've kind of left it in the hands of the speaker and folks to kind of figure out where we land between Rules Committee, Judiciary Committee, which I'm proud to serve on. That's that's where I can serve the best given my background. But we'll see. I'm open to a number of different options and just telling them, put me in, coach.
I'd love to have you on the Weaponization Committee because you know how to do cross. And you know what? So many hearings are terrible, and you know this, like I know this. They don't know what they're doing when they ask questions.
Yeah, you're right. It's actually a real problem. Everybody just wants to give their 5-minute speech. I'm like, look, man, let's just get at it. And if it's a hostile witness, then treat it appropriately. If it's a friendly witness, then just give them the runway and throw it to them. So, look, we need to have good people on that committee. Jim Jordan, obviously, is the chair of Judiciary. Not sure exactly how he's decided to structure it, but happy to be on it. If that's where put me in, coach. There's a number of places I'm happy to serve.
Now, Congressman, I want to talk to you about the debt, particularly because this has been your issue for a long time. I mentioned the RSC thing because I think politically it doesn't resonate with people, but I know the national debt limit is a must-have. It's got to be raised, and therefore you can get something. And I've begun the conversation, what do we want, and how do we get every Republican to agree to message it correctly? Yesterday, I had one of your colleagues suggest maybe we roll back the 87,000 IRS agent appropriation as the must-have. I argued I'd like the border wall as the must-have. I don't really care, but I do want the messaging. What's Chip Roy? If you were the king of the forest, not queen, not duke, not earl, what would you make the number one ask in exchange for raising the debt limit?
All right, give me a little latitude here for a slightly long answer.
You got a lot of runway. Go for it.
Okay, well, thanks. So, number one, it's not the debt for the sake of the debt on the main issue that you raised. It's because I don't want to fund the bureaucrats and the tyrants who are screwing with us every single day. Like, I don't want to give more money to the IRS or the FBI or the, DHS to not secure a border. I want us to use the power of the purse effectively. Yes, I care about the debt. I don't want to rack up debt for our kids and grandkids, but I also don't want to fund bureaucrats. How do we deal with it? In my perfect world, the Senate wouldn't have just stuck it to us with a $1.7 trillion bill that lasts through September, because then we would have used the power of the purse earlier to deal with the border, to deal with some of the issues you just raised, like the IRS agents. But unfortunately, they did that. So now we don't really have any leverage other than the debt ceiling until October 1st. So I think that generally debt ceiling fights ought to be about structural reforms to limit spending so that, frankly, we stop racking up debt. In other words, you connect the purpose of what you're trying to achieve to what you're taking as hostage. And I think that ought to be where we land. That being said, I do think the border crisis is something that ought to be part of that conversation, and we're going to be figuring that out over the next month or two. And again, I want my Democrat colleagues to come to the table. Let's work together to try to figure out how to hold down spending. Let's cap spending. Look, we can cap spending at FY22 levels, still keep defense where we just landed in December if we ratchet back non-defense discretionary to FY21 levels. Literally, that's the math. And
let me pause there for a second.
We have to.
I am a hawk. I'm a China hawk. I think we need 5% year over year real growth in the defense budget if we are not going to. I think we're in 1940, Congressman Roy. Are you of the opinion that we can exempt defense from a sequestration approach?
Well, how we land will be decided over the next 9 months. But let's start with the math that I just said, and it may not be perfect for what you said, but we just got a robust 10% increase in defense in that deal struck in December. So if we hold defense flat, I'm not saying that should be the goal, just listen to me. If we hold defense flat, and if we do non-defense discretionary at FY21 levels, we can then be capped at the FY22 levels that we agreed to last week. If defense hawks, and look, I'm kind of in between. I'm actually a defense hawk. I just don't like it being used as a weapon to basically make us keep racking up debt. We've got to be responsible. We got to choose on guns and butter. So I'm trying to fight both fights. If we need to increase defense spending, by the way, there's a lot of fat to cut over at the Defense Department. If we need to, then we can take those non-defense discretionary back to FY20 levels or FY19 levels. There are ways to do this and be responsible, but we have to set a ceiling, just like you live under in your house or in your business or the radio station.
Congressman, I want to talk about defense specifically and then go back to the debt limit. We are not funded fully. There isn't a single hawk in America who will tell you we are remotely close to where we need to deter Chinese aggression against Taiwan, against the first chain. Your colleagues have stood up, the Gallagher Committee. I'm glad they did. It will become obvious that we are simply behind on everything, including the Columbia class and the B-21. Even if you do what I hope you do, which is move money away from the Army and into the Navy, the Air Force, and Space Force, I'm all for reforms in the bureaucracy. I think having 10,000 lawyers at the Pentagon is insane. So there are places to make money, but the real money is the Columbia class. The real money is the B-21. The real money is in a 355-ship Navy that Donald Trump ran on. And I'm afraid the budget blunt instrument of sequestration set back this country's defenses 10 years. Now you have the floor. Because I'll go to battle with anyone on this. We are way underfunded on defense.
Well, I'll remind you that the head of the Office of Management and Budget under President Trump was one of the lead advocates for a robust Navy and strengthening our national defense as it relates to the Navy. But we have to force the conversation in this town about moving the dollars. Because what happens right now, the defense hawks demand more defense money. The Democrats say we'll cut a deal for more non-defense discretionary. Nobody will touch mandatory, and we're destroying our country with $32 trillion of debt. Look, Hugh, you and I both know every single 50 basis point increase in interest rates, it's another $100 billion of interest. In this year, we're going to have more interest than we're spending on our national defense. We cannot keep doing it. We can be both a budget hawk and a defense hawk. Look, I understand the threat in China. Mike Gallagher is a great friend. I support us going to absolute war, so to speak, to make sure that our defense is strong enough and our country is strong enough to take on China. But look, we have to do it responsibly, and we haven't been. We're letting the swamp feed us. We're letting the swamp set the terms. We set the terms, Hugh, not the swamp.
Well, Congressman, I agree. I'm just saying on the substantive issue, Russ Vought or Mick Mulvaney, I'm not sure which one you're referring to, they are the reason that Donald Trump failed to get even close to 355 ships, especially the second budget of the Trump years. I followed it intimately well. Pompeo's a buddy, O'Brien's a buddy. I know what happened. OMB cut the numbers that the Pentagon demanded, and we do not have the ships that we need, and we do not have the capacity to build as a result of the OMB under Donald Trump. And we are in peril. We're in 1940 right now.
Hugh, I just disagree. You should have Russ on your show to debate this, because I was there when Russ was talking about making sure we have a strong Navy. What he was fighting was the entire town, which was, and by the way, the budget they put forward, I criticized because it didn't balance for 15 years. It didn't do enough. But that was because they were sympathetic to what you're talking about. The fact is, we can have the defense spending levels that we need to have if we check the non-defense discretionary.
Exactly.
Bureaucrats,
I agree.
So let's have that fight. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Now let's get down to what we asked for. I believe that you could ask for the rollback of the administrative state that is represented by 87,000 IRS agents, because that makes a break with. We're not going to solve the debt by hiring more IRS agents to shake down small businesses. I think you can get that. I think you can get the fact that people crossing the border bring additional costs with them, whether people like it or not, whatever their position is. An open border means a rising national debt. I think you can tie those two together. Or you can do an entitlement reform. Raise the retirement age for people who are now 50 so they can plan. Raise the eligibility for Medicare up to 65 or 66 as opposed to 65. You can get something, but how do you get to what the ask is, Congressman Roy?
Well, we're working on that specifically. The first important part last week and working out to get this plane landed and structure our leadership and structure the message was to be serious about a commitment to limit spending, while acknowledging we definitely need to have a strong defense. That's what we did last week. Now we need to have the conversations about how we do it. In my view, we need to go after, as a singular message, whacking non-defense discretionary and the woke and weaponized government against the American people. Make that the enemy, because it is the enemy. We can slash and burn a lot of these bureaucrats and still have the services necessary to run the federal government under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. We can have a strong national defense. We can go beat up DOD to be non-woke, go find savings, and then stretch and increase what we need to make sure we beat China. And then we need to have a long-term conversation about mandatory spending. You cannot balance in 10 years if you don't go deal with the fact that we've got people who need to go back to work. You've got stretching abuses under the disability program and Social Security. You've got all sorts of health care reforms you can do to make Medicare more affordable. And frankly, you got to freeze and hold down Medicaid spending, which was bloated under Obamacare. If you do those things, you have a chance to get us to some sort of path for balance and get the federal government out of the lives of the American people and restore prosperity and have a strong country with a strong national defense, which is what we're supposed to do.
Now I agree with all that, Congressman, but the one thing I'm good at, and by the way, did you have Lino Graglia for con law?
I did, twice.
Yeah. Good for you. That's why you know what you're talking about. So you know that to make an argument before SCOTUS, you've got to come in with one key argument, because you got to get the first message out of your mouth has got to be the winning message, because you don't get a second chance. The court goes all over the place. We need a message, not the long message you just gave. We need an ask. I don't know what the ask is. I know that it's got to be, if it's going to work, we have to define what the ask is for the debt limit.
Hugh, but I started that little rant with the actual answer. We must end woke and weaponized government and stop funding bureaucrats that are engaged in tyranny over the American people. That's what we must do.
What does that translate into in legislative language?
That means limit non-defense discretionary spending. That means go after a woke, FBI. That means go cut and slash and burn the various bureaucratic programs that you can go find that are over funded. Frankly, Phil Graham wrote a great piece in the Wall Street Journal about, 3 weeks ago, talking about how much all of those agencies were plussed up under COVID. How much, if you go back to 2019 levels, you can actually be able to get back to agencies that aren't as bloated and then get money over to defense where it ought to be. We can win that message. The American people don't want bureaucrats. They want defense, and they want to stop racking up debt. That's where the American people are.
I agree. But it's got to be, I think, a capping non-discretionary defense spending at fiscal year 19. That is a great message. I can defend that. I can make that message. I can explain it. But the conference has to agree to it. And then we cannot have, half of the people run out and say that's not what we believe in. And then we got to get the Senate on board. You work for Senator Cornyn, one of the best messengers going in the Senate. Do you think there needs to be a small group of Republicans from the House to sit down with a small group of senators from the other side of the building and fix on the one paragraph message that we sell?
Already ahead of you, man. We're having those conversations. Started yesterday, and we're going to work on that and get it coordinated. We owe that to the American people. But I do want to say one thing, point of personal privilege. There's been a lot of stuff flying around over the last week. And, I hope I demonstrated that we did have a plan. We did want to work together with our whole team to figure out how to land the plane, but that it was important to get a lot of these things locked down. And frankly, the ones who are being pilloried, the guys who said no back in December, were the reason we were able to actually get to the place where we got something done. And I haven't seen as much unity as I saw yesterday or 2 days ago in the Republican conference meeting as I saw this week. And I'm telling you, it was healthy.
So, Congressman, from the. I was upset that it took so long to get to the negotiation, but I always exempted you and anyone who would go with you when the deal was struck. The 6 who didn't go, they're not ever going to show up here, and we don't need to debate their merits or non-merits. I want to look forward. I want to look at what happens next, and now I want to go to the Bureau. I worked with the FBI when I was at DOJ. You worked with the FBI when you were at the Assistant United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Texas, Steve Cox's old haunts. And so the Bureau has got a lot of great people. Right now, Chinese espionage is a big deal in the United States. If we whack the FBI, I want to whack the people who are telling Twitter what to suppress, and I want to plus up the number of agents on counterintelligence. How are you going to whack it carefully?
That's the important role of the Weaponization Committee under Jim Jordan and the Judiciary Committee on which I serve. I'm with you. Look, I am pro law enforcement focusing on the things they're supposed to focus on. I worked, as you just pointed out, with the FBI when I was going after bad guys with guns and going after drug traffickers, and I worked with all aspects of our federal law enforcement. And I want to support the 90+% who are great folks. What we want to end is the politicization and the wokeification of it. There's also areas there where they're engaged in areas they shouldn't be, right? Labeling parents as domestic terrorists and crap like that. Like, there are places to go cut where there are programs that need to be cut. And at the center of the FBI and DOJ, it's more about repurposing their mission and making sure they're all going after the actual bad guys, doing what they need to do. There's a lot more fluff to cut in other areas of our federal government. But we can go back to 2019 levels and do what we need to do. The Weaponization Committee, under Jim on the Judiciary Committee, we will highlight the bad stuff. We will target it and set ourselves up over the next 2 years to try to constrain it through the power of the purse. But more importantly, Lord willing, a Republican president in January of 25.
That all makes sense to me. Let me switch on my last question with you, Congressman Roy, to the regular order and appropriations. We have our first pressure point with the debt ceiling. You guys will get to one ask. I will help amplify it. But then we have the Appropriations Committee have got 15 different bills they've got to move, and they got to get sent to the Senate. Why can't we do that early so that we can frame those debates the same way that this debate will be framed? Because the way that Ken Calvert's a very dear friend of mine. I think he's a very good appropriator, Cardinal. Why can't we get this done in a hurry? Why do we have to work on the old Washington schedule?
Well, look, we agree. This is a part of the conversation that came out of last week. It was part of what one of our demands was getting those 12 bills done. It was part of what our demands was, which is offering amendments to the appropriations process to be able to cut spending on the floor. That will open it up and empower rank and file, frankly, to push back on some of those cardinals, even on our side of the aisle. Yesterday, we got a couple of more conservatives added to the Appropriations Committee. That's a good thing. That was a part of our debates last week. And look, we're committed to getting that forward. Now, the Senate hasn't done this in ages. They all just sit over there, do nothing, and then they play brinksmanship right up to the end. We're going to try to call them out on that. We also have another plan, which is once we get the appropriations bills through this spring, we will send over a CR attached to it or kind of along with it that would say, if you guys don't get this done, we've got a CR in place that will fund government at 98% of last year's levels. Now, that would be a cut, haircut. But that would then force them to want to come to the table to get the appropriations bills done, but you couldn't make the shutdown argument against it. So we're going to try to deploy.
Does that CR exempt defense?
No, that would be an across the board. But
God, Chip Roy, we can't do that. We can't do that.
Right, Hugh, you go tell Chuck Schumer then what he's going to do. In other words, look, the Senate would have to pass it. So what's likely going to occur, because the Democrats in the Senate aren't going to work with us, likely, is that we'll end up with a CR, which means your defense levels will stay flat. But we have to force them to the table. The only way to force them to the table is to be able to message to the American people what we're going to do to limit spending and to hold it in check, while also promoting a strong appropriations package for defense and for homeland security and for the things the American people want us to do.
Chip, please hear me. Chip, please hear me. I got 2 kids on active duty, right? I've got a nephew on active duty. You cannot use a CR for defense. The Pentagon does not work on the CR. You know that. I know that. We're in 1940 and you guys are screwing around with defense.
You go get Chuck Schumer on your show then.
No,
Don't talk to me.
this is owned by the Republicans. This is what the House can do since we won the House, and you guys can
Dude,
fashion a package.
How are you going to get that through the Senate? Walk me through how you're going to get an appropriations package through the Senate.
You send over the CR like you just said, but you exempt defense from the cuts of the 98%. You take it out of everywhere else, and you get the guts. I use the civilized term to put some entitlement reform in there and raise the retirement age to 67. And you stand back and you argue we're for a strong defense and a sane budget. You can win that,
right.
But you will
right.
lose.
And we will send over an appropriations package that funds defense at the levels it's supposed to fund it at, which will be at last year's or higher. That's what we will do. We will then send over the rest of the appropriations package. We will then send over a CR to the Senate. And look, we can debate those levels. If we can get the appropriations for defense passed, which we should, and hammer them to get it done before September, then we can have a debate about the rest of the levels and hold the CR at a 98% haircut, 99% haircut, whatever we choose. But the point is, you got to have leverage to push back on them that the non-defense discretionary is going to get cut.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But please, Congressman, keep coming back, because the one thing on which you will cripple our presidential candidate if you cripple defense, because our presidential candidate is going to be running on China. You know that. I know that. It's 1940. We can't act like it's 1989 in defense.
Hey, the difference is in 1940, we didn't have GDP to debt well over 100%. We got that after World War II because we've been an irresponsible bunch of idiots in this town. So now we have a two-front war, debt and China, and we better get busy doing it.
I agree. Win both fronts. But the first front that's coming to kill Americans is China. Not our debt, China. But Congressman, I really appreciate your taking 25 minutes with me. Keep coming back. Always a pleasure. I think you conducted yourself honorably, transparently, and I think you become a force for reason in Washington, D.C. as a consequence. Thank you, Congressman Roy.
Thank you.